Assalamualaikum and very good morning to all my beloved students. So for today we are going to cover 12.4 voluntary and involuntary actions. So I repeat, the title for today is 12.4 voluntary and involuntary actions. Okay, so let's take a look on the learning standard that you have to cover for today. If pupils are able to compare and contrast voluntary and involuntary actions. So you have to compare and contrast voluntary and involuntary actions. Okay, then number 2, describe the reflex actions involving 2 neurons and another one is 3 neurons. Okay, and last one, draw a reflex arch. Right, so these are the learning standards that you have to cover for today's lesson. Alright, so now let's go to the table of comparison between voluntary actions and involuntary actions. Okay, so you should know that response produced are either voluntary action or involuntary actions. So we go to the similarities. Similarity between the voluntary action and involuntary action. Okay, so what is the similarity? Both actions. Okay, so please remember, if you want to write in the essay, for the similarity you have to write both. Right? So both refer to the voluntary and involuntary actions. So both actions involve stimulation. Stimulation of the stimulus, stimulation of the changes around us. Alright. Okay, then involve impulse, neuron, and an effector organ. Okay, that is referred to the similarity. Both action involve stimulation, impulse, neuron, and also effector organ. Okay, we go to the differences. Differences between voluntary and involuntary actions. Okay, so what is the voluntary action? Voluntary action that is referred to the actions that we are conscious. We are conscious. Kita sedar apa yang kita lakukan. We conscious of and done on our will. So this action done on our will. Right? Okay. So for the involuntary actions, for the involuntary action, it is action that occur automatically. Occur automatically and occurs without us being conscious. Alright, so it occurs without control. We do not conscious about the action. So the action occur automatically. Okay, that is referred to the involuntary action. Okay, that is referred to the first difference. Voluntary action that we are conscious. Okay, for the involuntary action that occur automatically or without conscious. Okay, now we go to the second differences. Okay, voluntary action involve the somatic nervous system. Alright, so we have know that somatic nervous system is one of the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system can be divided into two subsystems, which are somatic system and autonomous nervous system. Okay, so somatic nervous system, somatic nervous system control voluntary action. So that's why involuntary action, it involves the somatic nervous system. Somatic nervous system will control the voluntary action. Okay, whereby in the involuntary actions, involuntary actions involve the autonomous nervous system. Autonomous nervous system. Okay, so you have to differentiate between these two actions. Yeah. Okay, the next we go to the third difference. Yeah, voluntary action controlled by cerebral cortex. Yeah, cerebral cortex. It is the biggest part of the brain, right? Okay, cerebral cortex, whereby involuntary action control, yeah, involuntary action controlled by the medulla oblongata and hypothalamus, right? Okay, controlled by the medulla oblongata and hypothalamus. Okay, and the last difference in a in the voluntary action involve the reaction of skeletal muscle. Yeah, reaction of skeletal muscle, right? Okay, whereby in the involuntary action involve the reaction of the smooth muscle and gland. Smooth muscle and gland. Yeah, in the voluntary action, it involve the reaction of skeletal muscle. Yes, skeletal muscle. Alright, so that are referred to the comparison between voluntary action and involuntary actions. Okay, so I hope you can remember the similarity and also the differences between these two types of action. Okay, now, so let's discuss the voluntary actions involving skeletal muscles. Yeah, voluntary actions involving skeletal muscle. So you have learned that muscle tissue can be divided into three types. Okay, so what are they? They are skeletal muscle tissue, yeah, and then smooth muscle tissue, and last one is cardiac muscle tissue. So involuntary actions, yeah, so involuntary actions, it involve skeletal muscle, yeah, skeletal muscle tissue. Okay, the voluntary actions is referred to the conscious action, yeah, refer to the conscious action, yeah, the action that we are conscious, yeah. So for example, walking, talking, sleeping, reading, watching this video. So all of these are conscious action. It involves the skeletal muscles. Yeah, it involves the skeletal muscles that control by the cerebral cortex. Yeah, cerebral cortex is a part of the cerebrum. Alright. Okay, so now let's go to this diagram. So these are referred to the voluntary actions involving the skeletal muscle. Okay, for example, okay, we go to number one. Stimulus occurs when the teacher questions the pupils, right? So that is referred to the stimulus. So when the teacher questions the pupils, so that are referred to the stimulus. Okay, next we go to the number two. The pupil's receptor, yeah, the pupil's receptor receive the stimulus and transmit the nerve impulse to the cerebrum through sensory neuron. Alright, okay, so the receptor receive the stimulus and will generate the impulse. Right, and then the impulse will be transmitted to the cerebrum. Yeah, to the cerebrum. Okay, through what neuron? You still remember? There are three types of the neuron, isn't it? Right? So that refer to the sensory neuron. Yeah, sensory neuron will transmit the nerve impulse from the receptor, right? From the receptor organ to the cerebrum. Yeah, to the cerebrum. Right? Okay, that is referred to the sensory neuron. Yeah? Okay, so in the cerebrum, okay, what happened in the cerebrum? So the cerebrum interprets, yeah, integrates, yeah, analyze, yeah, the information, yeah, the nerve impulse, and then it will analyze the information. All right, okay, and then the nerve impulse is sent again to the effector. Yeah, again to the effector. Okay, through what? Through what neuron? It is through motor neuron. Yeah, through the motor neuron. Okay, so in the cerebral cortex will involve the relay neuron. Relay neuron refer to the interneuron. Alright. Okay, then after that, okay, number 4, the effector receive the information or receive the nerve impulse. Okay, so the effector involved here is referred to the skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles. And then number 5, the pupils raise his hand to answer the question. Okay, that is referred to the response. Okay, so these are referred to the voluntary actions that involve the skeletal muscle. Okay, now let's take a look on the involuntary actions involving skeletal muscle. Involuntary actions involving skeletal muscle. So this response we call as reflex response. Reflex response. Okay, what is the reflex response? It is a response that occurs in spontaneous. Occurs in spontaneous. Okay. So for immediate and spontaneous action, right? Okay, so this involuntary action is for immediate and spontaneous action. For example, touch hot things or break the fingers. It is a fast response. Reflex response is a fast response of stimulus without being controlled by the brain. Without being controlled by the brain. So, reflex response is a fast response that occurs in immediate action and also in spontaneous action. Okay. So, this is an example of the involuntary action that involves skeletal muscle that refer to the reflex response. This is referred to the reflex response. Okay. So, this person touched the hot things. The hot things here. And then what happened? So, it respond as it took away the hand from the hot thing. Okay, that is referred to the reflex response. It occurs in immediate and spontaneous action. Okay, the pathway involved known as reflex arch. Okay, so the pathway that involved in the reflex response is called or known as reflex arch. So reflex arch refers to the pathway in the reflex response. Okay, so it will involve the 3 types of the neurons. Okay, what are they? Sensory neurons, relay neurons, and motor neurons. Alright, so I repeat, the pathway that involve the reflex response is called as reflex arch. The pathway that involve the reflex response is called as reflex arch. Alright, so there are 2 types of the reflex arch. Okay, what are they? There are 3 neurons reflex arch, and second one is 2 neuron reflex arch. So in the 3 neuron reflex arch, it will involve the 3 types of the neurons. Okay, so there are sensory neurons, relay neurons, and also motor neuron. Okay, so for the 2 neurons reflex arch, it will only involve the sensory neuron and the motor neuron. Okay, so now let's take a look on the reflex arch of the 3 types of neuron. Okay, so this is an example of the 3 neuron reflex arch. 3 neuron reflex arch. Okay, again, so what is a reflex arch? It is referred to the pathway that involved in the reflex action. That involved in the reflex action. So for this one is involve 3 types of the neuron. They are sensory neuron, relay neuron, and also motor neuron. Okay, so let's take a look on this diagram. Okay, so this diagram show the reflex action, okay, whereby this person touch the hot objects, okay, touch the hot object, and the reflex action occur here. Okay, we go to the stimulus. Okay, the skin is contact with a hot object. Yeah, the skin is contact with a hot object. Okay, so this person touch the hot object. So the sensory receptor, sensory receptor that refer to the thermoreceptor here, thermoreceptor will detect the changes in the temperature. So the detect the stimulus, sensory receptor detect the stimulus and triggers a nerve impulse. Triggers a nerve impulse. And then the nerve impulse is carried by the sensory neuron. Sensory neuron send the impulse to the spinal cord. Okay, direct to the spinal cord and transfer to relay neuron. Okay, transfer to the relay neuron by synapse. Okay, so do you remember what is a synapse? It is a narrow gap between the two neurons. Okay, so I repeat here, the sensory neurons send the nerve impulse to the spinal cord. Send the nerve impulse to the spinal cord and transfer to the relay neuron in the spinal cord. And then, okay, so what happened there? The relay neuron in the spinal cord, so the nerve impulse is transferred from relay neuron to the motor neuron. Okay, so in the spinal cord, okay, the relay neuron that just received the impulse from the sensory neuron will transfer, or we carry the nerve impulse to the motor neuron, to the motor neuron. Okay, so in the motor neuron, okay, motor neuron will carry the impulse to the effector. Okay, so what is the effector here? It is referred to the bicep muscle. Bicep muscle. Okay, so what is a bicep muscle? That are referred to the our hand muscle, right? Okay, our hand muscle. Okay, then the bicep muscle receive the impulse. Okay, receive the impulse from motor neuron. Okay, and then what happened when the effector receive the impulse? So it will create a response. It will create a response. So the bicep muscle contracts. Will contracts and pulls hand away. Pulls the hand away from hot object. Alright. Okay, so that are referred to the reflex response. Reflex response or reflex action. Okay, so this is referred to the reflex arch. Okay, what is a reflex arch? It is a pathway that involved in the reflex action. Okay, so once again, so this is referred to the reflex action that involved when the person touch the hot object. Okay, so it's starting from the skin. Skin touch the hot object, and then what happened here? The sensory receptor on the skin, it is a thermoreceptor, will generate the impulse and send the impulse to the spinal cord. Send the impulse to the spinal cord through sensory neurons. So the green color here is referred to the sensory neurons. So sensory neurons send the impulse to the spinal cord, okay, and transfer to the relay neuron. Okay, transfer to the relay neuron here. Okay, and then the relay neuron will transfer or will carry the impulse to the motor neuron. Okay, and then the motor neuron will carry the impulse to the effector here. So the effector here refer to the bicep muscle. Okay, bicep muscle contract and pulls hands away from the hot object. So it occurs in immediate action and also in spontaneous. It occurs in immediate and spontaneous. Okay, so why? Okay, why it occurs in spontaneous? Because to avoid any injuries. Okay, so you have to know why there is a reflex action occur, because to avoid any injuries. Any injuries. Okay, so that I refer to the three neuron reflex arch. Okay, why three neuron? Because involve sensory neuron, a relay neuron, and motor neuron. Alright, Okay, so you have to remember that reflex action or reflex arch do not involve the brain. Yeah, do not involve the brain. Why? Because it is involuntary action. Yeah, involuntary action. So we do not aware or we do not conscious, okay, about the action. Alright, okay, next we go to the two neuron reflex arch. Okay, so these are referred to the two neuron reflex arch. Yeah? Two neuron reflex arch. Okay, example of the action is knee jerk. Yeah? Knee jerk or patella reflex. Yeah? Patella reflex. Okay, this refer to the knee jerk. Okay, so usually the doctor test the effectiveness of the nerve system, yeah, by tapping the knee, tapping on the knee using a rubber hammer here, yeah, using a rubber hammer here. So to test the effectiveness of our nervous system, all right. Okay, so let's go to the reflex arch here that involve the two neuron here. Okay, so what are the two neuron involved here? They are sensory neuron and only motor neuron. Yeah, only two types of the neuron involved here. They are sensory neuron and motor neuron. Okay, so let's take a look on the pathway. Okay, starting from the stimulus here. Okay, the hammer, yeah, the rubber hammer here hits a tendon. Yeah, tendon that connects the quadricep muscle. Yeah, quadricep muscle is our calf muscle here. Yeah, to a bone in the lower leg. Okay, so the stimulus here refer to the hammer hit the tendon. Yeah, hit the tendon. Alright. Okay, in the quadricep muscle. Yeah, that connect the quadricep muscle. Okay, then what happened here? Sensory neuron. Okay, sensory neuron. Okay, sensory neurons send the impulse to the spinal cord. Okay, before that, once the hammer hits the tendon, yeah, once the hammer hits the tendon, so it will create a nerve impulse. It will trigger a nerve impulse, and then this nerve impulse, okay, is carried by the sensory neuron. Yeah, but it's carried by the sensory neuron to the spinal cord. Okay, so this one, yeah, let's take a look on this one. So this is referred to the stimulus. Yeah, the hammer hits the tendon here. Alright, and then the receptor here will produce the nerve impulse. Yeah, will generate the nerve impulse and it will send. Yeah, so the sensory neuron here will send the impulse to the spinal cord. Yeah, to the spinal cord. And then the spinal cord. Yeah, okay, we go to this one. Spinal cord triggering nerve impulse to the motor neuron. Yeah, so the impulse is directly transferred to the motor neuron. Yeah, to the motor neuron here. Okay, so what happened? The quadricep muscle receive. So this is referred to the quadricep. A quadricep muscle receive impulse from motor neuron and it will create a response. Yeah, so the muscle contract and jerking the leg forward. Yeah, so jerk the leg forward. Okay, it will jerk the leg forward. That is referred to the response. Yeah, two neuron reflex response. Okay, example of the response is knee jerk. Yeah, knee jerk. Okay, why two neuron? Because it only involves a sensory neuron and motor neuron. Okay. Alright, so that's all in the 12.4 voluntary and involuntary actions. So make sure you can compare between voluntary and involuntary actions and make sure you can explain the involuntary actions that involve skeletal muscle that are referred to the reflex response or reflex action. So there are two types of the reflex arch. Okay, what are they? Three neurons reflex arch and the two neurons reflex arch. Okay, so with that, R refer to the 12.4 Arch. Okay, so that's all for now for 12.4. Okay, I hope you can understand. Yeah, please read again and again, and please do your own concept map until you do understand this subtopic. Okay, so that's all for now, girls. Take care, everyone.